Welcome back to the Horsemen Pro Football Talk podcast presented by Rising Sun Global Media. I'm Zach.
And I'm Jeff.
We have 1 week remaining until the 2020 NFL season begins, and we all know what that means. It's fantasy time. So today we're going to jump right in and give you some great fantasy advice for your upcoming draft. But first, help us reach 1,000 subscribers on YouTube and have a shot at an authentic NFL jersey from the NFL shop on us. Yeah, that's right, an authentic NFL jersey just by helping us reach 1,000 subscribers. So if you're watching this, you're already on YouTube, so hit that subscribe button and click that little bell icon so you don't miss any upcoming episodes or the jersey giveaway. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, head on over to YouTube, search the Horsemen Pro Football Talk, subscribe, and notify. Now it's time for some Fantasy Central. Let's go. Jumping right in, let's talk running backs. Christian McCaffrey is going to be the number one pick in 99% of the leagues out there. But what about the rest of the field? What running back should you take in round one, and who are you letting go to take a different position?
Well, like you said, CMC is obvious. Number one, his average draft position is 1.2. So essentially going number one overall in almost all the drafts. But the number two and number three are obviously Saquon and Zeke. I don't know about Zeke. He might get some touches taken away from him. I think they're going to be a little more pass happy than usual. The offensive line has gotten older. They lost Travis Frederick. I think that's going to be a little bit of a deal. So kind of he's going to be productive. He's Zeke. He's going to eat, but I don't think he's going to eat as much as he has been. But the real intriguing one to me coming in those first 10 picks is CEH, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And, Damian Williams, after he opted out, it was the obvious choice because people always go for running backs in the Andy Reid system anyways, right? I mean, you look at Brian Westbrook and then all the running backs that he's had with the Chiefs, and every running back Andy Reid has produces. CEH is going to have a massive workload with the opt-out of Damian Williams. And in my opinion, could probably be the number one overall running back this year. He's going to have
ahead of McCaffrey.
Yeah, he's got some big.
Oh boy,
he's got to outdo McCaffrey, but I really think with the offense and the way it's designed, he could have a huge year.
So where would you take him if you had the number one pick in your league? Would you take him number one over McCaffrey?
No, I would take Christian McCaffrey all day. You got to take the tried and true with the number one overall. But CEH absolutely should go top 10 in every draft. There's no reason not to draft him top 10. The 14 of the top 15 in average draft position this year are running back. So that kind of tells you where we're at with the running back market in fantasy. Wide receiver, kind of a deeper position. But running backs you need to be taking running backs early. If you're lucky enough to have pick 6 through 10 in your draft in a 10 team league, then you could snag 2 top tier running backs. If you have the 6th pick and you're able to get a CEH plus an Austin Eckler, you're gonna be looking pretty good.
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to pick your brain on a couple players real quick. David Johnson, last couple years, he's been way up there in the draft boards. This year, he's playing with Houston. Where would you take David Johnson? You going to take him in the first or second round? You going to let him slide to a later kind of round?
Well, I've done a couple random drafts already, and I think I took him in one draft, and I took him in the 4th round, I believe. Nope, scratch that, 5th round. Took him in the 5th round. I think he's being taken in the 5th round a lot. And that's probably where he should go. He's not going to be at the top tier running backs with all the CMCs and the Dalvin Cooks and the Derrick Henrys of the world. But I think he's going to be solid. They gave up a lot when they gave up D-Hop. That's a lot of production you have to replace. And sure, they brought in Brandon Cooks and Randall Cobb, but that's not going to replace all the production that D-Hop's leaving. Brandon Cooks has been a little injury prone. Well, Fuller has always been injury prone. So then if you have a game where you're relying on Randall Cobb as your number one receiver, which is very possible, then David Johnson's probably going to have like 12 catches in that game. So David Johnson is kind of a sleeper. He's being taken early, so it's hard to call him a sleeper. But there are a lot of people writing him off. But I think that they're going to use him a lot in that offense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think making that trade for DeAndre Hopkins, Bill O'Brien's going to try to make it a point to get David Johnson the ball and boost his numbers. But the big question mark with him, the way it's been the last few years, is can he stay healthy? So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, they have a solid line. They re-signed Laramie Tunsil for $1 billion. So if he can make some room, David Johnson can get behind him. Who knows what'll happen? So, another player I want to ask. Well, probably two more. Todd Gurley, now with the Falcons, predominantly been a high pick to late first round, early second round, like he was last year. Are you taking Todd Gurley up in the first couple of rounds, or are you going to pass him down to the fourth, fifth, sixth round?
Todd Gurley's an intriguing one, right? Because like a lot of people, I'm sure, I'm a huge Todd Gurley fan. He's obviously a monster when he's healthy, and I'm more in line of belief that his knee isn't as terrible as people say. Like you got to think the guys in the NFL, they've taken so much abuse playing the game that most of them have arthritis anyways. Like offensive linemen and defensive linemen definitely have arthritis in their knees. They still produce. So, they already said they're looking at him getting 20 to 25 touches a game. Now, if you ask me, Todd Gurley getting 20 to 25 touches a game is like 20 to 25 fantasy points a game. He's going to produce. If he's getting the ball, he's a playmaker. He's going to make things happen. And in that offense, if you want to think more in depth with it, in that offense, teams are going to have to worry about the passing game. They have obviously Julio and Calvin Ridley that can do anything from a wide receiver standpoint. You have Hayden Hurst, who's going to eat up the middle of the field. So, how do you pay attention to all the weapons? And you throw Todd Gurley in there, he could run. That offensive line has been a little shaky. There are a couple pieces there that I like. Alex Mack and Jake Matthews, good offensive line, a little shaky as of recently. But I like Todd Gurley a lot, probably more of a somewhere between sixth to eighth round because of the risk. But not somebody that I'm just going to throw off and say, no, I'm not drafting this guy.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to be down in the lower kind of rounds, but there's a lot of value there if he could stay healthy and he can produce. So he might be one of those kind of on the border sleeper picks for people, depending on what kind of league you're in. But if you could snag him in one of those later kind of rounds, I think that'll bring some good value to your team.
Yeah, no doubt. He's one of those guys. It's like a make or break kind of thing. If you're drafting him, maybe you drafted him a little earlier. You're taking a risk, obviously, but there's huge upside when you get. I mean, he obviously has top five, top three potential.
Yeah, for sure. All right, the next guy I want to talk about, LeVeon Bell. Is his fantasy days done?
Yeah, it sure seems like it, right? He didn't do terrible last year, but he didn't. He wasn't the Le'Veon Bell we remembered. And this Jets offense, sure they got some young offensive linemen in there, but the weapons are gone all around them, right? And so when you're going to be keying in on the running back, they're going to be stacked boxes all year against the Jets, and then they're going to be forcing Sam Darnold to make plays when they have to pass the ball because the defense they traded away Jamal Adams there. CJ Mosley's sitting out this year. He opted out. A couple more guys that have opted out and some have left. The defense isn't going to be as stout as it was last year. It was the only bright spot for the Jets last year. With the defense getting worse, they're going to have to pass more. And you would think, oh, maybe Le'Veon gets 9 or 10 catches a game. But that's just not the way Adam Gase's offenses have ever worked, wherever he's been. It's just not, let's give the running back the ball in the passing game. It's a let's get the ball downfield kind of passing game. So Le'Veon Bell, if you had to ask me where I think he's going to finish, I'm probably saying like somewhere in the 20 to 25 this year. I
Ooh, damn.
Yeah, I think Le'Veon is
Done
his
for.
like yeah, his fantasy days are done.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. Who knows? He might surprise us all and come out, but I don't see it happening. But the last group of guys I want to talk about, and we'll do this real quick so we can move on to the quarterbacks. Jonathan Taylor and Marlon Mack. What are your thoughts on the two? Who should you take first? Where are you taking them? I mean, I'm high on both guys. I don't know, man. I don't know. I'd take either one of them because I think they're both going to produce this year.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are high on Jonathan Taylor, and it shows. Like when I went to do my first random draft, when I saw that Jonathan Taylor, his average draft position, he was going at 60, and Marlon Mack was 136, I couldn't believe it because
That's a hell of a steal right there on Marlon Mack.
a crazy steal. You literally getting Marlon Mack in the 12th round, a starter that had 1,000 rushing yards, 10
Yeah,
touchdowns.
he was number 8. Yeah, I think he was 8th last year in rushing. The only one in the top 8 that didn't fumble all season.
Yeah, didn't fumble. He was in the top 5 pretty much all year until he missed a couple games, I believe, with a wrist injury. But even still, had 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, like you said, top 10 for running backs. But there's so much hype around Jonathan Taylor, and sure, deservedly so. But you got to remember, this is Mack's team. The last 2 years, he's balled out. He's been the starter. He's the guy. And Jonathan Taylor, I mean, I feel like people see him and it's just reminiscent of Saquon Barkley. He runs like a monster. He's got huge legs like Saquon. He's a tank of a dude. But with Jonathan Taylor going 60th overall, it's just I don't think you're going to get the value that you're drafting him for there.
Yeah, only time will tell. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what Jonathan Taylor does this year. If he could step right in and produce, I think the Colts might ship Mack out the next year because that'll be a lot of trade value right there.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm wondering too. I don't know if they want to hold on to him this year or not. As a Colts fan, for anybody that may not pay as much attention or isn't a Colts fan, I pay attention to the Colts social media and their YouTube and everything. Marlon Mack has been getting a lot of work in the passing game. So the downs you normally see Naheem Hines, they're working Marlon Mack in. Plus, Marlon Mack is a starting running back. Adds to Marlon Mack's value. They're going to use Jonathan Taylor on probably third down, give Marlon Mack a break here and there kind of downs. But I think Marlon Mack is still the workhorse back. I think he's going to get more work than we're used to seeing him. And like we said, average draft position on 136, quite possibly the biggest steal of the draft.
Agreed. So you hear that? If he's in the low rounds, take him.
Take him if you need him.
All right, real quick. Top 5 running backs on your board.
Top 5, I'm going to go with CMC, obvious number 1, Saquon number 2. I like Kamara for number 3, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire for number 4, and probably Derrick Henry for number 5 because he has also been working on the passing game with Deion Lewis out of town.
It's a solid lineup right there. We'll see how it all shakes out. All right, moving on to quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. They're the first two coming off the board. Where are they going? I know in a lot of leagues, people are drafting up, taking them in even the first round. Are you going to take them in the first? Are you going to take them in second, third? Where are you going to take them?
I was in one draft and I thought about taking either Lamar or Mahomes in the second, but I just can't do it. Quarterback is such a deep position outside of what Patrick Mahomes did 2 years ago and what Lamar did last year. A lot of quarterbacks pretty much every year finish right around the same point total, somewhere between 15 and 18 on average per game. But you have your outliers like Mahomes and Jackson. Now, I think Jackson is more inept to repeat what he did because of the rushing production that you get from him. I think the amount of points that he can give you from week to week is going to be reminiscent of what he did last year. Now, 1,000 yards for a quarterback is a crazy thing to do. So I don't know if he'll be able to reproduce that. But I don't think 600, 700, 750 yards is out of the realm of possibility. But I do see him repeating his passing production. I don't think that's going anywhere. It's still,
If he doesn't get better.
yeah, exactly. You would assume he's only going to continue to get better. His completion percentage gets better every year. The team around him keeps getting better every year, and so I expect him to possibly have 4,000 passing yards this year, have another 30 plus touchdown passing touchdown kind of year. So if I'm taking one in the first or second round, it's probably going to be Jackson first, and then Mahomes. But I was in a draft just 2 nights ago, actually, where Mahomes was the second overall pick and Lamar was the number 4 overall pick. So there's a huge variation where these guys are going. And with what we've seen from them in the past, there's really, I mean, a good case for taking them anywhere you want.
Pretty solid. So besides Jackson and Mahomes, who are your next few quarterbacks you got on the board, and where are you going to take them in the draft?
All right. So if you're asking me where I'll give you 3 through 6. I would take after those, I would take Russell Wilson because he's all reliable. Last 3 years, the most consistent quarterback in fantasy. Then you're probably taking Deshaun Watson. He's the next dual threat quarterback. He's got a great arm. The team around him is still kind of full of playmakers, not as good as it was, but you're probably still taking Deshaun Watson there. And then I like Dak a lot at number 5. I think he'll be a top 5 quarterback. He has a plethora of weapons around him. And with Mike McCarthy there, I think he'll have a huge year. But just outside the top 5, if you ask me, the next guy outside the top 5 there, I'm probably going to have to go with Tom Brady as much as it hurts to even say that that's a thing. But I mean, that's a pass happy offense. He has amazing weapons. They added Gronk. I mean, you gotta. I mean, he's probably going to be a top 5, but I don't even want to have him in my top 10. But if we're being realistic, he's probably up there. And where I'm taking him, I'm probably starting with Russell Wilson in the fourth round, maybe the fifth, depending on how the draft's going, what pick did I have, and how's it shaking out. But Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott should probably go no later than the fifth round, and Tom Brady and Deshaun Watson probably no later than the fifth or sixth round. So they're all kind of right there in the middle. But it really just depends on your lineup build. But I mean, if you're taking a quarterback that early, you have to know that there's an inherent risk of losing out on a major contributor on a position where you're starting 2 guys like running back or wide receiver.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think there's any value to be had in Teddy Bridgewater this year?
You know, Teddy Bridgewater is actually probably my biggest quarterback sleeper of the year. I don't know how he's going 26th overall. He- like I don't get it. I'm speechless. You know, he has all the weapons around him. You have DJ Moore, who showed last year he's ready to produce and be a superstar. They brought in Robbie Anderson, who was the Jets' only explosive player, right? So they bring him over, another explosive player on the offense. You get CMC. You have Curtis Samuel, who I think is going to thrive in a number 3 role. And it's all there around him. You know, they play in a tough division, so sure, they might not make the playoffs. But when you're talking about fantasy football, we're not talking about who's going to be the best team. This is who's going to produce a lot for you. And the Panthers defense is pretty bad. Their secondary is probably the worst in the league or among the worst in the league. The Jags are up there, but they're going to give up a lot of points, which means their offense is going to have to pass a lot. So when their offense is passing a lot, Teddy Bridgewater is going to be racking up the points. And Teddy Bridgewater has never been a guy that turns the ball over. Even when he was in Minnesota and he was a younger quarterback, he had some mishaps, but he's never been a guy that makes reckless plays. And I think the offense that he's getting brought into is suited perfect for his skill set. He has weapons around him. Teddy Bridgewater is absolutely going to be a top 10 quarterback this year, quite possibly a top 5 quarterback this year.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right, last one we're going to talk about before we move on. Ben Roethlisberger. I've been high on Big Ben for the last 3 years or so. He's a fantasy points machine, except last year I took him and he got hurt for the whole entire year. But that's besides the point. Is Big Ben going to return to form? Can he produce the numbers? Can you get value with him? And are you going to take him in your top 10?
I don't. We're not far enough out of the whole Tommy John thing because it wasn't too long ago when guys got Tommy John, their career was basically over, right? But with technology nowadays and health technology, these guys are able to play again. But how effective are they really going to be? It's kind of worked in baseball. I'll be interested to see how it works in an NFL quarterback, right? This is a guy that traditionally throws like 35 to 40 passes a game. And coming off of Tommy John surgery, I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know how effective he'll be. He's taken a lot of damage in his day. It's not like the elbow's the only thing he's got to deal with. And the team around him isn't as good as it used to be. We're not talking about Big Ben when he has the killer bees around him. He had AB and Juju Smith-Schuster. He still produced. As soon as AB was out of town, the whole offense stopped. And I think he only played 2 games, so it's not a fair assessment of the entire offense. But if you're asking me, my opinion is a little biased because I don't like Big Ben at all. But I don't think we're getting the fantasy lover kind of Big Ben. I think he'll be a bottom 15 kind of quarterback this year. Nothing crazy. I don't like a whole lot of things in that offense. There's only one Steeler that I think is worth drafting, and it's strictly only for backup purposes because of draft position. But we'll get to that one later.
Heard that. All right, real quick, just for clarity's sake, top 5 quarterbacks, run them down.
Top 5. Okay, so I'm going Lamar, Dak, Mahomes, Russell Wilson. Oh, and who's that elusive fifth?
Tom Brady?
I'm gonna get crazy and say Josh Allen has a crazy year.
Yeah, I think he'll produce. I think he'll be a good pickup too. So, all right, moving on to the wide receivers. Who you got coming off your board number 1 in the receiver position? Where are you taking them in the first round?
A lot of people have Michael Thomas coming off at number 1. He's the only receiver in the top 15, but I think Emmanuel Sanders is really going to affect the kind of numbers that he's been pulling in, and you still have Jared Cook there, and so my number 1 receiver personally is going to be Julio Jones. I know they brought in Hayden Hurst, but they've had Austin Hooper there for years. They've had Calvin Ridley there for years, and Julio Jones just consistently puts up huge numbers.
Yeah, I was going to say consistent every single year.
5 years in a row or whatever it is. I believe it's 5 years in a row with 1,300 or more yards, which is ridiculous. Okay, this guy, if he plays as long as Jerry Rice, is going to shatter Jerry Rice's records. He's on track to do it. And I don't think it's going to be any different this year. I think, like we talked about with Todd Gurley, they're going to limit his touches. So if they're going to limit the running game, then you have to imagine they're going to be passing it probably 65 to 75% of the time. And Julio is like we said, consistent. He's consistent. He's a consistent route runner. He's consistent about being able to get open. They know what they're doing there. And I think he's the obvious choice to be the number 1 receiver this year.
Very interesting. Obviously the majority of drafts, they are taking Michael Thomas, but I will agree. I think Sanders is going to come in there and take some of those targets away from him this year. So there might be a strong case for Julio. Depends on if Calvin Ridley is just going to sit back like he's done the last couple of years and piss away my opportunity to get points because he's been on my squad. But
yeah, and that it's been weird with those two because Calvin Ridley doesn't have all the catches and the yards, but seems to always get the touchdowns. And Julio always gets the yards and the catches, but is so unlucky in fantasy when it comes to touchdowns. But I think it's all going to come together. I think, Calvin Ridley, solid number two, but I think Julio's going to have one of the best wide receiver years we've ever seen this year.
Agree. And check our Facebook, Twitter. I'm going to put this up once we publish this. Is Julio Jones a top 5 all-time wide receiver? That is the question. Hop on. Let us know what you think. Facebook, Twitter, at Horsemen Sports. All right, so I want to ask you about DeVante Adams. I know last year he was the number 1 receiver coming off the board in most of the drafts. Where do you have DeVante this year?
DeVante is an interesting one, right? Because last year we saw him operating as the clear number 1 receiver, and he was still able to do his thing. And this year they signed Devin Funchess. I was hoping they were going to have Devin Funchess because I thought that would kind of increase the value of Adams, opening him up a little bit and letting him work. But like I said, last year he proved that he can be the only receiver and produce. But the only question with him really is his health, right? He had a really bad concussion a couple years ago, and then he had some ankle issues last year. And as he gets older, you wonder with the usage, is he going to keep stacking up? And when you're talking about a receiver that you're taking as probably the second or third receiver off the board in many drafts, if he's out for 4 games, that's kind of a big deal, especially if it's towards the end of the year. If they want to rest him because he was getting kind of banged up a little bit and you're in the playoffs without your number 1. That can be a problem. But I don't like drafting based on, minor injuries in the past. I think DeVante Adams is my number 2 receiver this year, behind Julio Jones.
You got him in front of Thomas?
I do have him in front of Michael Thomas this year.
Nice.
Yeah.
So this rookie receiver class, pretty loaded. I know there's some big names out there. I think quite a few of them are going to do very well this year. Who do you have at the top of the rookie class, and are you going to take them early in the draft?
Not me. I'm not much of a take a rookie early kind of guy unless it's a running back. That's going to get a heavy workload. I mean, that's given in fantasy. But rookie wide receivers always make me nervous. There's usually another guy already there that's the number 1, like a Michael Pittman, T.Y. Hilton kind of thing. But my big one is going to be Jerry Jeudy. A lot of people have been talking about CeeDee Lamb, and I understand why there's a lot of potential there. But Jerry Jeudy, to me, has potential to be a number 1. We saw last year, last year we saw that Cortland Sutton had the potential to be a number 1 for Denver. He had great chemistry with Drew Lock, and he was getting the job done. He did outstanding for anybody that had him in fantasy. But I think Jerry Jeudy, like I said when we were doing our division debates, I think Jerry Jeudy has all the talent to be what we see from Julio Jones. He's got all the physical capabilities. He's a monster, and he has great hands, great route running. I see Jerry Jeudy having a huge impact, I don't know about 100 catches, but he's an explosive player. I can see him having 1,000 yards, close to 10 touchdowns, and being a huge fantasy asset this year.
Where are you going to take him in the draft? Are you going to take him in the later rounds?
Yeah, his average draft position right now is 126. So I think I took him in one of my random drafts, and I'm definitely taking him a little later because I can afford to. A lot of people are sleeping on him right now. I'm not really sure why. But if I have a chance to take him as my flex play, I'm probably doing that.
Yeah, I think he'll produce. I also think CeeDee Lamb will get quite a few targets this year, and Henry Ruggs will be a big one too.
Yeah, I see what people are talking about with CeeDee Lamb, right? He's got all the talent, all the potential, a lot like Jerry Jeudy. He's just as talented and has just as much potential. But what's different there is that they have Zeke in the backfield. They got to give him touches. They got to give Amari Cooper touches, and they got to give Michael Gallup touches. And Michael Gallup has proven to be a serviceable number two. So whether they give Michael Gallup the number two touches or CeeDee Lamb the number two touches, they're going to be, in my opinion, those two are going to kind of be around the same and kind of eat away at each other's production. Whereas Amari, being the number one, he's going to get most of the targets in the offense.
Very solid point. I like it. All right, top 5 receivers on your board. Run them down. Go.
All right, we're going Julio Jones, DeVante Adams, Michael Thomas. 4 and 5 get tricky. Mike Evans. And I want to point out, Mike Evans is a big one for me this year because they're talking about him and Tom Brady are talking about, making Mike Evans one of the best to ever play the game. So I think that they're going to favor Mike Evans this year. I think we're going to see a whole different kind of skill set for Mike Evans this year. So as a fantasy owner, be prepared for Mike Evans to have an incredible year. He's my number 4. And my number 5, ooh, that's a tough one. Go ahead and give me Tyreek. It's hard to go away from somebody in the Chiefs offense.
Very true. All right, moving on to tight ends. I mean, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on tight ends because a lot of them are about the same category. But the two that stand out, Travis Kelce, George Kittle, are you going to move up, take them in the first couple of rounds? Or are you going to try to get them in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round?
Really, it all depends on draft position. If I'm taking one of those guys and how risky is somebody else feeling. But these are guys that I've looked at in the 3rd round and in the 4th round. Because in the 1st round, I want a running back. I think a running back is imperative. And then if I have an early pick in the 2nd round, I want another running back. If I am a little later, I want a receiver. But then you really got to start thinking about if Mahomes and Lamar are there, right? And if Kelce and Kittle are there. Because these are guys that at their position can literally win you the league, right? They can get you 60 points more than the next guy ever. And the guy that I think is more worth taking that kind of risk is a George Kittle. Because Kittle, sure, he's a great run blocker, and they like to run the ball there in San Francisco, and they're probably going to do more of it this year because of the lack of depth at receiver and the major injuries at receiver. But that lack of depth and the injuries happening at receiver ensure to me that this is tight end. We're probably talking about getting 100 catches this year. And he broke the record a couple years ago for tight end yards in a year. I expect him to shatter that record. Like George Kittle is going to reset the tight end record books this year. And so he's a guy, I wouldn't blame you if you took him in the 1st. Realistically, I wouldn't advise it, but I wouldn't blame you for taking him in the 1st, certainly not the 3rd or the 4th.
I agree. I know, especially in PPR leagues, he's going to have some huge numbers. So it might be worth it taking him maybe in the 2nd, but definitely the 3rd if you have that opportunity to snag him up.
Yeah, absolutely. And same with Travis Kelce. He's just like Russell Wilson. Travis Kelce's the most consistent producer on the board as of right now. And a guy that puts up 1,000 yards every year. So you can't go wrong there. There's a lot of weapons. So it's kind of could be hit or miss with touchdowns and yards and catches, but he produces all the time. You expect him to get the ball too.
So after Kittle and Kelce, what other kind of tight ends you think will bring a lot of value on draft day?
Well, it gets a little weird after them, right? Because you have guys that have a lot of talent, and when they're healthy, they put up a lot of fantasy points. But they can't stay on the field. And those guys being an Evan Ingram or a Hunter Henry, they're probably the next 2 guys that I would like to take. But these are guys that just can't seem to stay on the field. And Evan Ingram, his case is a little more iffy to me because there are so many wide receivers there, right? But there's so much talent. Now, people probably think I'm crazy for not mentioning 2 other tight ends in Mark Andrews and Zach Ertz. I think they have a lot of potential, but I have different questions about them, but if you're asking me who do I have as my next two below Kelce and Kittle, I'm taking Ingram and Henry.
Where about what round are you going to take them in?
Those would probably be like if I was waiting until maybe round 7 to round 9 kind of range.
Yeah, not bad. I was thinking about 6, 7, 8. It's about the same.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
it, it depends. It depends on the board, how many people in your league, where everybody falls in your draft order too. But yeah, I'd probably take them anywhere between 6 to 9. Top 5 tight ends. Who you got?
All right, we're going with George Kittle, Zach Ertz, Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, Darren Waller.
Darren Waller up there.
Waller the
I,
baller, baby.
I personally like Jared Cook. I took him last year and got hell of a steal on him.
Yeah, dude, when it comes to him, he's just there are two things. Consistency, week to week consistency, which is tough to come by with any tight end, but his week to week consistency has dropped every year, I feel like. And again, with Emmanuel Sanders in that offense, it's even more targets. I think he's going to be used more as a run blocker kind of guy this year to help Alvin Kamara get his yards.
All right. So, are there any defenses or kickers that, if they're on the board in the later rounds, you're willing to forego a bench player to snag up before anybody else gets?
Yeah, there are a couple of intriguing defenses. I think the 49ers, they didn't, I mean, outside of DeForest Buckner, I don't believe they lost anybody. So, and they're going to be able to fill that spot pretty easily. You know, they still have some talent at the defensive tackle position. So I don't see much change. I think they're still going to be an elite group. But the Ravens are one that is just every year they're good. Even after Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and all them guys left, there was no fall off. I thought after Terrell Suggs left and they got rid of C.J. Mosley, I thought there would be another fall off, but they just do such a great job of bringing guys in. They draft guys with free agency, and they were good last year. They didn't get any worse, but they brought in Calais Campbell, and I think they're going to be able to stop the run and the pass at will. So how do you not take a Ravens defense? So you asked me, who would I rather take in terms of defense and give up a bench position? And those would be either the Niners, the Ravens, or the Colts.
I like your assessment. I agree with all three of those. Definitely the Ravens. Even though they lost Earl Thomas, they're still going to ball out this year.
Yeah, it seems with the Ravens they can just plug and play. So even with him out of the fold, I assume the next guy is just going to produce just as well.
All right, last topic we're going to talk about today, sleeper picks. Any sleepers out there that you can get great value in the draft, and where are you going to take them?
Yeah, so I have a couple sleepers for every position. We'll start with the quarterbacks. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Daniel Jones. All right, we talked about Teddy
I
Bridgewater.
agree.
You know, earlier we talked about Teddy. He's my other sleeper. But Daniel Jones showed out last year. There was so much shit talked about Daniel Jones going into the year, and how could they pick this guy at number 6 and da 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 da. Da. And the dude came in and balled out. You know, he didn't play the whole year, so he didn't really even have a chance at the rookie records. But I think if they would have started him instead of Eli, he would have had a couple new rookie records. He was balling out. But I think there's great value there with Daniel Jones. He's the 15th quarterback coming off the board. So I think if you can snag Daniel Jones and probably say the 11th or 12th round and get in there real quick, that's probably a good steal.
Who else you got on your sleeper board? Anybody?
Yeah. If we move down to running backs, we talked about Marlon Mack earlier. His draft position absolutely ridiculous. But outside of him, I like Jordan Howard a lot. I think people sleep on him because he keeps moving teams, and he's one of those guys that has some injury woes and when he gets hurt, somebody takes his job, and it's real unfortunate. He's been real unlucky. But when Jordan Howard starts, he produces. And the offensive line in Miami is a little shaky, and that worries me a little bit too. But if there's one guy that I think could have a really good bounce back year with a team that looks to be on the up and up, it's Jordan
Yeah, any receiver sleepers you got?
Howard. Yeah, I actually have another Dolphin, Preston Williams. He got hurt last year, which is really unfortunate. He looked like he was going to be a stud for the Dolphins. I expect him to come back. I don't know if he'll be ready for the start of the year, but I do expect him to come back, take over as the number one, even with DeVante Parker showing out at the end of last year. DeVante Parker showed out because he was like the only one getting targets, right? Preston Williams is going to come in. He's going to be the number one. I expect him to eat a lot of targets. I expect him to show out. As long as he doesn't re-injure that ACL, I expect him to be fine. But also Henry Ruggs is an interesting pick. You know, the only reason I'm kind of down on Darren Waller for any reason would be the plethora of wide receivers that the Raiders brought in this year. But I think out of all the pass catchers there, Henry Ruggs is the most explosive, one of the most explosive players to come out of this 2020 draft period, and he has a lot of upside. I think we should see from Henry Ruggs what we saw from Marquise Brown last year with the Ravens. He's that kind of player. He'll give you that kind of explosive ability. And I think he'll help Derek Carr have a bounce back year. They're finally getting some pieces around Derek Carr again, and that offense is finally going to look good.
Sounds good, man. Well, I think we're about out of time here. You got any parting words you want to say? Any notables? Anything you want to throw out?
Yeah, just two more quick sleeper picks from my tight ends. People are you're not going to start these guys most likely, but if you happen to need a tight end at the end of the draft, maybe you overlooked it because you didn't get an earlier guy. Eric Ebron and Jonnu Smith are being picked ridiculously late. Don't sleep on them.
Heard that. All right, so next week will be the day before the season starts. So we'll be rolling out our pick 'em picks, which check us out on Facebook. We have a league you can get in, a little friendly league, maybe win some prizes at the end of the year, but hop in, make your picks, go against us. Brad's in it too. He's off today. He's not with us, but get in there every week. You just make your pick on who you think's going to win the games at the end of the year. Whoever has the most, we'll toss you a prize. And don't forget, hop over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that notify button so you catch every episode. Enter in to win after we hit 1,000 subscribers in an authentic NFL jersey from the NFL shop, player of your choice. So help us out. We appreciate it. We appreciate you listening in every week, and we look forward to seeing you next week. See ya.
Sayonara.